So I've been doing some hard thinking about this whole YouTube thing, this content creation generation that I appear to be a part of. And it's led me to realize just how much progress needs to be made within the realm of my channel. Because I have about three different modes of content that I tend to default to. Videos that are just stories of things that have happened to me in the past, kind of basic philosophical discussions that don't really move the conversation forward very much, but instead focus on framing things in a funny or interesting way rather than adding to the conversation as it currently exists. And videos doing some variation of those things in combination with one another in an aesthetically interesting kind of way, just sort of commentating on the videos that I've already made with those two things somehow finding their way into the mix and me attempting to edit around that the inherently lacking premise that sets. And I'm very self-aware of this. I'm very self-aware that if I continue making the videos that I am making as I'm making them, that it's going to get derivative. I don't think it's gotten derivative yet because on some level every video I've made is different from one another, but I can see the writing on the wall that if things continue going the way that they do, that's how they'll end up. So I need a hard reset. I need to be getting better at, for one, having a larger variation of topics, and secondly, being able to more easily parse media, because I've been consuming a lot more media than I typically would. The difference is that it's been a very long time since I've taken in any sort of formal analysis. Now, I do read from time to time. I consider reading to be an important part of my life, but nowhere near the degree that I should be reading, and I'm also not taking in analysis of media to train myself to think in terms of how to analyze media, because you can teach yourself how to discuss anything. You just have to be willing to learn how to set your mind around the parameters of what analysis is, be able to have a large base of comparisons to make between things and know what those things actually mean. And in order to do that, you have to fail a bunch of times. I think that premise is where a lot of my earliest videos, when I started finding Digi's content, for instance, who coincidentally is subscribed to my main channel now and has instantly kicked into gear this motivation to improve my videos, because now my sort of YouTube childhood hero appears to be watching my content in the most unexpected turn of events I could find. And so I need a hard reset. I need to improve. And I've been needing to improve on all of these things for a while, and I've been very aware of that. And I think the fact that I'll get 200 views at least on just about anything that I throw onto the internet. Even my secondary channel now tends to reach just about 100 views, if not over that, every time I post something there. Um, it's made me, consider much more or excuse me, much less the implications of the things that I post. This is one of the huge problems of my house, is that I'm just constantly hearing noise all the time, nothing but noise. I can never record anything because I'm constantly paranoid of other people hearing the things that I'm saying, because yes, the walls really are that thin. And so I'll have like a great idea and I'll be super inspired to record that idea, and I just can't because, other people will be easily hearing what I'm saying. And then I'll have to start talking really quiet like this, and then it'll ruin the content of the video because I'm not speaking in the way that those ideas are intended to be spoken in. Instead, I'm just speaking, and just speaking doesn't necessarily do justice to the intentions behind what you want to do. And so I run into these technical issues all the time, or I guess you could just say circumstantial issues, in that I'm constantly, surrounded by a barrage of noise, and am unable to record at the times where I am in ideal shape to be recording. But that's an issue I need to get over simply by, you know, getting to my own place eventually. But it also makes me more self aware of the speaking problems that I have, because as I've become more complacent with the fact that it doesn't matter what I post, I could post a video of me shooting someone on 4th Avenue and a bunch of people would like, watch, and subscribe to it just because I did it. And so, because I'm so aware of this, I also need to realize that there are very substantial speaking problems that I have where I say like constantly way too much. That back in the day, that was one of the filler words that I had sought to completely eradicate from my speech, because it is just that repetitive and it adds nothing to any of the speech whatsoever. There's no meaning added in by saying like. It's a completely useless word. And in my old vlogs, when I was starting out around mid 2016, as I was inspired by Gigi's content, I liked the density that was in his videos, and I sought to copy the density of his writing and unedited videos and work that into my own content in an unscripted and scripted form, to where I was constantly thinking about how those words were coming out. And because back then I was getting no views and I was much worse as a content creator than I am now, I was holding every video that I made to an extremely high standard. It may not have appeared that way because every video I was making was really bad and had quite glaring flaws in them, but there were other videos that I had made that were even more bad, that midway through, a quarter through, got thrown away because I got too angry in the middle of recording them at myself. And regularly I would slap myself across the face for making a bad video, or violently punish myself in some other way because I was just not matching up to the person who I wanted to be. And so there was very strict, even just like that, me saying that was a very strict rule of no saying you can't do that, because that's simply filling time in the recording, where the time in which you're thinking is the time in which you're verbalizing these meaningless words or these meaningless sounds throughout speech that you have to train yourself out of doing. During conversations or social circumstances, people don't tell you to do that. They don't tell you to be more dense with how you're speaking because it's not a formal environment. But people are not necessarily going to take the same liberties that they would to you in conversation on a YouTube video. People are looking for something a bit better, a bit more structured. I mean, I'm not always. A lot of the time, I just want to hear a person talk, and having the ums, not a whole bunch, but having these little characteristics of human speech may even humanize it to a degree, may even make it be more personable, which for me, for the immersion that I would seek to get through the parasocial relationship that the video would be presenting, would be a great thing. But I'm not necessarily looking for a parasocial relationship with myself. I mean, sometimes I'm attempting to project the best aspects of that type of content, but I'm also trying to manufacture that authenticity. I'm trying to present that authenticity in a way that is very personable, but is also studied to a degree that it takes out all of those unnecessary things that regularly mar our speech without you noticing that I'm trying to do that, thereby enhancing the immersion because you're not noticing the mistakes. You're also not being immersed by them being personable, but other things in the video make up for that by being personable. So you have to get a bit creative with how the video is filmed, structured, how you're speaking, rather than just defaulting to things that we all effectively know are, characteristic of normal interaction. You have to go steps beyond that, and I want to go steps beyond that, because back when I was starting out, and I was so angry at myself all the time for every little mistake that I made. It wasn't necessarily healthy, but it showed drive. It showed a higher standard for myself than I have now because no one is holding me to that standard. People will watch my videos and like them regardless of what it is. The only person who can hold me to that standard is myself. And thus, we continue watching more shows and continue practicing out of the limelight, but in the bedroom night. And that's what you're for, old dear channel. I feel like my dog looks like the kind of person who would enjoy watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Isn't that the movie? The movie with the movie, the like Spielberg movie from the 1970s. It was supposed to have been revolutionary within the extra extraterrestrial kind of sci-fi space movies. I was listening to the soundtrack for that film the other day, or at least bits of the soundtrack for that film the other day, and I was thinking, I gotta use that music in a video somehow. I was thinking of something really ethereal. Maybe I could make a video that's really ethereal. It's about like a winter storm or something, and I could use like black and white footage of snow, and I could use the music from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I can tell you this because, for one, no one on this channel would steal this idea, but second of all, you have no idea what I would be doing with it. I know what I would be doing with it, but you don't know what I'd be doing with it. So, even if someone tomorrow did that, it's not as if them taking the aesthetics would mean much if the meaning or the context that gives it all meaning is not given to you. My heart's been stabilizing a bit. Today, the highest reported level was like 175 over like 120 something, and I think the highest pulse that I had was 111. I think I had 120 at one point or something like that, something along those lines. So it's been going up and down just in stage 2. I've just been like consistently going up and down in stage 2, even when laying down in this bed, you know? Even when not exerting myself physically, being completely relaxed, no anxiety, no worry on my mind. I've been going basically just throughout stage 2 throughout the day. There was one reading that I did. It was the only time that I was in the green today, because I was at like 139 over like 80 something. I think that was the number. Can't remember quite all of them off the top of my head, but I mean 140, or once you get into 140, that starts to, that's when you start getting into, you know, like bad hypertensive territory. But my pulse was at like just a little bit above 60. So I think like that's why the monitor told me I was in the green, was because my heart was beating hard, but it wasn't beating fast, you know? And you know, I think the medicine's doing its job. Is that there's been some chest pain, but the chest pain has been nowhere near at the level that it normally is. Now, one of the funny things about taking this medicine is that for a while I thought everyone had chest pain when they get to a certain age. No. Heart palpitations, chest pain, and blood pressure so high that you cannot properly do your daily activities is no normal thing, my friend. It is not something that everyone lives with. I think a lot about my diet now at this point. You know, how can I adjust my diet Obviously, how can I adjust my behaviors? Things I should be doing, things I shouldn't be doing. These are all thoughts that I've been having. How to be much more careful. I need to be much more careful. Generally, I veer on the side of caution with things, but I need to be veering on the side of caution with what I eat, with what goes into my body, no matter what it is. Um, and so I've had an ungodly salt intake for my entire life, for example. Consumed a lot of salt, insane amounts of salt. Got to do something about that. Got to do something about the amount of salt that I consume. That increases blood pressure. Got to do something about the lack of vegetables that I eat, about the lack of healthy food. Got to do something about not getting enough exercise. Now, of course, in talking about that, I also have to consult my doctor about exercise because there's like a 2-week period that you have to be on this medicine until it gets its full effects, and you need doctor's instructions when it comes to exercise. So that's something I need to address. But I don't know, I need to be a lot more careful when it comes to my blood pressure. I need to be a lot more proactive in how I do things. And it made me think, like, I used to think of exercise and eating healthy as these lofty goals, these things that I would do to make my life better in some way. And now at this point, it's just I need to eat better and I need to get better exercise, not to have some sort of lofty goal that improves my life, but to bring my life back to normal, or to some semblance of normalcy, to make my life closer to what it once was. Or now, even with this medicine, I'm in stage 2. It's not as bad as being at emergency levels, which is where I was at without it. So emergency levels without it, you know, I can live with stage 2. I mean, it's not fun, but like having that be consistent versus the other is obviously I'll take what I can get. And I have a lower pulse because of the medicine too, so in the beginning it was a little bit scary because I had really high blood pressure where, my heart was just beating really hard. And then a really low pulse, so if your pulse is like at 65 and your blood pressure is at like 72 over 114 or whatever it was, that's a bit scary, because your heart's beating really hard, but it's beating slow at the same time. It's not too unusual, but it's weird, It was something I noticed when I started taking the medicine. But it started stabilizing. Like now at this point, it feels like it's equalized a lot more. If I don't physically exert myself much, generally, I'm okay. But I need to be getting to a point where I'm also exercising. I need to be getting to a point where everything that I put in my body is put in with care, immense care. And that's what I need to be focusing on right now when it comes to the high blood pressure stuff. And I'll tell you, myself, in the future, whenever I look back at this video, I've had kidney stones. I had my first kidney stone when I was 17 years old, and now I have severe high blood pressure at 18 years old. I mean, I had high blood pressure when I was 16. It just was untreated for 2 years. But my hair is turning more and more gray and white. My hair was turning gray and white back then, but it's getting worse now. More and more of it's falling out. That's part of hypertension. And so, I'm glad the medicine is working. It's not at its full effect yet, but when it gets to its full effect, I'm going to be at a level that's stable enough to partake in my daily activities and start taking more proactive steps to mitigate this issue to the point where it would be at a point where I can live, more stably. And I can start getting back to doing some of the things that I used to be able to do that I can't do now. Or at least enjoy life more, so here's to the future, I guess. And maybe I'll look back on this video when I've improved all of these things and have a bit of a laugh with an A and two F's. So, recently, Digi unsubscribed from my channel. You probably didn't know that Digi was subscribed, but briefly, she was seeking to do this community outreach program, which I assume was based in the idea that the parasocial relationship behind her content was waning, and so she wanted to seek out younger, newer creators who were doing the things that she and her crew would have otherwise been doing, at least in her eyes, at one point or another. People who were inspired by her content. And so, in order to strengthen that parasocial relationship, which is kind of an integral aspect of her content, she was seeking out people who seemed like they were the most enveloped in it, who happened to be making videos. She attempted to collaborate with many of these people, while at the same time making a podcast about, making friends for the first time after years and years of social isolation, and then relating this newfound interest in people to her gender transition. So of course, me being a fairly prominent figure in terms of being seen as a Digi fan, I was subscribed to by her. So all my content were subscribing to as I lived in that sphere. I don't think it had anything to do with the actual quality of my content, because if you look at my channel, it's very boogie. I'm not particularly trying to appeal to anyone. This is just me in the most authentic form, which cool people are into that. They think it's neat. But when Digi described making her vlogs back in 2016, she described it as something that, she had to get used to the bad camera angle, or she had to get used to the poor video quality, these kind of things. And I never saw those things as hindrances on her videos. I saw them as enhancers on her videos. I saw them as things that improved them. So I saw it differently. I made my content emphasizing those things that I got as an influence from her, that I liked the most, that she happened to want to de-emphasize, that she happened to want to make those a less prominent element of her content. And so, of course, I was left with the influence of the old character. I was left taking the things that I thought were good that few other people thought were good, that the mainstream wouldn't have thought were good, because I never had a mainstream mindset as it pertains to the things that I enjoy in YouTube videos, or just media in general. And so it was pretty much inevitable that she would have stopped watching my videos. I mean, look at this. Like, there's nothing, what do we say, particularly appealing about this to anyone who isn't already into the same kind of thing. I'm not making this for anyone. When you look at my titles and thumbnails, and they're
actively trying to keep people out. You know, the goal is for less people to watch, not more. And so, someone with that kind of mainstream intention in mind, someone who enjoys a mainstream kind of video, who wants to make a mainstream kind of video, is not going to find anything here. At least, not most of what's here. There are some things that are here that someone like that could get something out of, but in general, it's not the approach that I've tried to take with my content. And so, there's a conflict there, there's a contradiction between the two different kinds of mindsets. It was inevitable. But I also, you know, because of this difference, have been unable to get anything out of her content, you know? The new videos, you know, from the last 2 years have been nothing that I've wanted to see. It was kind of like, you know, ever since she met May and started doing these things that she had, you know, always talked about wanting to do, less and less of what I wanted out of her videos was present. And so, of course, I lost my connection to it. And I was one of the first people to say this. So I was one of the first people to say Digi is shit now, and now all of a sudden, you know, between people who like her videos who did not get into her in the, you know, in the post-May era, they're going to see it differently. Because they're going back in reflection and watching that, you know, 2016 grimy, lo-fi character. Whereas, with someone like me, we were around there for the beginning, and we wanted that. You know, the person who feels as though they're always on the internet, and is actively cataloging every second of that, and is also in this in-between period between not fully having left their childhood behind. Now, one of the recurring themes in Digi's videos in the 2016, 2017, even, 2015 kind of era was the constant self-analysis of interests and discussion of interests that she had when she was a teenager. Because up to this point, these ideas hadn't been gotten out yet, and so there was just a rapid stream of ideas that could be refined and presented in a way that wouldn't have been as good in the past, but now they could do that. And so, Digi released all these videos that now all of a sudden she had an outlet for it and a good one. And you don't have another period of your life when you're doing YouTube as a job and you have to always get content out that's like that, where you just have all of these ideas stored up that are ready to go that you can finally talk about every single day, one after another. Eventually the stream of good ideas is more gradual. You know, it's not constant. And I think when you combine the lifestyle that she had of being isolated all the time with the constant videography that gave you the sensation that you were almost watching that life alongside her, you know, you were kind of there. Just because there was so much of it to where, you know, you asked them what they did that day and they would say, oh, videos, because, you know, videos are all that's came out. You know, that's several hours of your day that's being cataloged because it's what you did. And that simultaneous sensation that you're living, you know, this existence alongside someone when you yourself are always in your room, never leaving your room, actively avoiding other people, don't even have online friends, maybe. And that was the situation I was in. You're going to connect with something like that because it gives you the sense that, you know, there's another person there. It's something to be excited about, to wait for every day. You know, you could wake up and then watch, you know, nothing but Digi or PCP content, and the day would be over, and that would just be from, you know, one day the videos were released. So it was special. It was very different. than the gradual stream that you get now. Combined again with the appealing lifestyle that's relatable, interesting, or unique, and easier to relate to because of those circumstantial elements, but also because uh, Digi herself was reflecting on angsty and teenage feelings that for a lot of people who are younger, like myself, or view themselves as outsiders, will gravitate more towards. Because in her teenage years, a lot of it was about being as authentic as possible. Being as obsessed with a particular set of interests that are outside of the mainstream. Whereas if you look at when her taste crystallized into adulthood as she changed into a different person, the affectations that that taste would possess are much more normy. Shows like Psychopaths, one of her favorite shows, for example. The direction with content naturally reflected what she enjoyed, which appealed to normies in a refined way. So, she started doing that with her content, because she wanted to make what she enjoyed. Nothing wrong with that, but it's a difference in mindset that produces that kind of enjoyment. And one of the things that always kind of perturbed me was the fact that Digi actively portrays herself as an outsider, because anime generally as normies understand it, is an outsider medium. It's a medium in which otaku or regular consumers of anime are considered kind of weird, pariahs by broader society. Now this is to a lesser extent these days, but it existed at the time she was brought up. And so, in her mind, being an outsider just means being an anime fan, or it just means having YouTube as a job. But those things are normie hobbies now. Those things are normie professions now, even. They aren't that strange. You could say something like liking lolicon puts you in that category, makes you a pariah in broader society, but if more people had access to it, they'd probably be lolicons as well, if the stigma was removed. In fact, most people probably would be if there's no stigma there. So, there's not anything that's there that's you can look at particularly and go, this is outsider affectations. She sees it that way because she's older and from a generation in which these things were less okay. And so that element of the outsider is still an intrinsic part of her identity. And so she plasters it over much of her content. Even though, to someone like me, where these things are readily okay, that's, that's just being a normie. I had a broader train of thought. I forget exactly where it went. So I think Digi is still stuck with this older mindset, and that's part of why she's so unaware of how other people see this. And also, she's from an era where wanting to have any friends or wanting to be seen as a sociable human to appeal to anyone necessitated letting go of these more strange trends within yourself. Because what I described to you as a Digi being is the normie anime fan, right? Anime fans who are normies, not by anime standards, but by just all standards, and also by anime standards. Normies. Okay. But then there are outsiders by anime standards as well who still, exist in that sphere. I would probably be consider that to some degree, not to a huge degree, um, as far as anime taste goes. But in terms of the content that I like consuming and what I like making, I would be considered, um, you know, far, far out there, very different. And so, when we consider all of these things, it makes perfect sense why I would disconnect with her videos for so long now, even though I have gratitude for her for, what her content did for me when I was younger. It makes perfect sense that I wouldn't enjoy it. And it also makes perfect sense why she wouldn't enjoy my content. Because I can't really be described as a normie on any end of the spectrum. Not easily, I don't think. Unless you look at like my film taste. My film taste is very, very normie. Like my favorite movie is Taxi Driver, and second favorite is The Big Lebowski, and then third is an animated tragic like drama movie called When the Wind Blows, which is, I guess that's like the most weird and outsider thing I have on my film 3x3 besides Love and Pop by P.D. Ekiano, but um, no, it's kind of out there. I mean, I love the movie Who Framed Captain Alex, like deeply, like genuinely love it. I don't just like it as an ironic thing, but even that I think is kind of getting kind of normie to say. So my film taste is pretty standard. Um, but when you look at other aspects of myself, like my philosophy, the way that I think, the way that the way that I describe things, see the world, interests I have, hobbies I have, it's all very, very in opposition to mainstream society. Like, Digi thinks that just smoking weed and doing acid count as like being a junkie or something, or being real pro drug because you're altering your states all the time, and it's like this is the most normie things you could be doing. Tobacco, alcohol, weed. This is very, very normal. These things are largely pretty accepted um, by in a large enough amount of people to not be able to really describe yourself in such strong terms. Um, but when I look at myself, like I've tried incredibly obscure things that very few people would know about, or even necessarily know the class that they're from. And so it's one of those things where um, you just don't know what to do other than make the stuff that you want to see in the world, and that's all you got to do.
I've been talking shit about the lack of camera angles in my house for the last 3 years? Four? It's been a very long time that I've been dissatisfied with how this place looks. And I don't think it's necessarily the result of me being some kind of pretentious asshole who just needs everything to be beautiful all the time. I think it's more a case of I was put into a situation in which I was shown specific things that evoked emotions from me. And I want to feel those emotions. I want them to be real. I want them to be something that comes out. And when I look at this room, when I try to film in here, I'm not able to feel those emotions that I would want to evoke in the viewer. And so the ideas are the only thing that I can get out in a, not to say dry, but in a manner with less of the specific personality that I want to convey. And so the personality of the video doesn't become the posters that I have up saying something about me or the specific conditions of the room saying something about me. It's the inverse. The lack of conditions or the lack of posters in the room are what tells you about me. And what's being told is that I'm pissed off and bored for the fact that there isn't enough beauty around me. Definitely not a pretentious asshole.